My name is Camila, and until recently I thought I had a pretty good life. I'm 34, live in Seattle, and work as a freelance graphic designer. I married Michael 7 years ago. He was smart, calm, stable, the kind of man who made life feel safe. He wasn't overly romantic, but he always remembered our anniversary, sent me random texts during the day, and brought home my favorite chocolate when I had a rough week. Michael traveled a lot for work. He was a project engineer, often sent to job sites across the West Coast. He'd be gone for a week or two, sometimes more. At first, I missed him terribly, but over the years, I got used to our rhythm. We had our rituals: long FaceTime calls at night, voice memos in the morning, shared Google calendars. I trusted him. Completely. We didn't have kids yet, though we were talking about IVF. I had some fertility issues, and we'd been saving for the treatments. Michael was incredibly supportive about it, always telling me, when the time's right, it'll happen. That gave me hope. He never pressured me. Our life wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. Saturday mornings at the farmer's market, Sunday movie marathons, the way he rubbed my back when I couldn't sleep. Those tiny, quiet moments made me believe we were solid, unshakable. I didn't have the closest relationship with his family, though. His mom and sister lived in San Diego. They visited maybe once a year, and I always got the sense that they didn't fully warm up to me. Nothing dramatic, just polite distance. Michael said they were just old school, and I let it go. Looking back now, I see the cracks I didn't want to admit were there. The times he didn't answer his phone on weekends because he said he was in the field. The little lies I brushed off because he always made up for them. I chose to believe the best in him, and maybe that was my biggest mistake. Because I had no idea the man I loved, trusted, was living a double life. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The day everything changed started like any other. It was a Thursday. I remember because I was working on a logo for a small bakery client and waiting for Michael to call after his meeting in Portland. Instead, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Camilla Taylor?" a voice asked. "Yeah? I'm sorry to inform you. There's been an accident." My heart stopped. And so did everything I thought I knew about my life. The hours after that call were a blur. I remember grabbing my coat, forgetting my keys, then rushing back into the house in a panic. I drove to the hospital, praying they had made some kind of mistake. But when I got there, a nurse met me with a somber look and led me to a private room. Michael was gone. A drunk driver had run a red light and crashed into his rental car on the way back from a work meeting. He died on impact. There was nothing anyone could have done. I sat there, staring at the wall, feeling like I'd stepped outside my body. The next few days were filled with paperwork, calls, arrangements, things I never imagined I'd be handling at 34. His company offered condolences, my friends dropped off food, but nothing made sense. It felt unreal. Michael's mother and sister flew in from San Diego. I hadn't seen them in over a year. When they arrived, they hugged me briefly, but something about the interaction felt distant. Cold, even. I figured maybe grief affects people differently. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being kept at arm's length. We held the funeral 3 days later. It was small, just close friends, co-workers, and family. I remember standing near the casket, numb, watching people I barely knew walk up and tell me how wonderful Michael was, how lucky I had been. I smiled and nodded, trying not to collapse. And then she walked in. A woman, maybe in her early 30s, with long dark hair, wearing a black dress that looked just a little too perfect. She held the hands of 2 small children, a boy and a girl, maybe 4 and 6. At first, I assumed she was someone from Michael's job, but then the little girl said something that made my blood run cold. "Mommy, is Daddy sleeping?" I turned, slowly. My heart was pounding. Maybe I'd misheard, but the woman's eyes met mine, and she didn't look confused. She looked angry, possessive, like I was the one who didn't belong. A few minutes later, I saw her whisper something to Michael's sister. They hugged, familiar, intimate. That's when I knew something was very, very wrong. When I approached her and introduced myself, she said flatly, "I know who you are." I waited for her to explain. Instead, she pulled the little girl closer and said, "I'm Renee, Michael's wife." I blinked, laughed awkwardly, thinking it had to be a misunderstanding. But her face didn't change. And then she added, like a knife to my gut, He told me you were just someone from work. I don't remember how the rest of the funeral ended. People came up to me, but their words sounded muffled, like they were underwater. My mind couldn't focus on anything except Renee's face. So calm, so sure of her place. And those kids. His kids? After everyone left, I sat alone in the front pew. My body was there, but my spirit had left. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I was too numb to feel anything except shock. It was like I'd been dropped into someone else's nightmare. I thought about confronting Michael's mom and sister right then, but I couldn't move. I just kept thinking, was any of it real? 7 years of marriage, the IVF plans, the promises, was I ever really his wife? Or just a placeholder? That night, back home, I barely made it through the front door. I collapsed on the couch, still in my funeral dress. I stared at the ceiling until it got dark, until my eyes burned from not blinking. When I finally moved, it was only to get his laptop from the office. It wasn't password protected. Michael always said he had nothing to hide. That irony hit me like a slap. I opened his email. I wish I could say I found nothing, that this had all been a mistake. But it was all there. Years of messages between him and Renee, family photos in San Diego, videos of him at birthday parties, school plays, pictures of him holding babies I never knew existed. He hadn't just been visiting a second family. He had lived a whole other life. There were hotel reservations for weekends he told me he was in Portland, bank statements showing a second checking account, flights booked to San Diego under a different last name, his mother's maiden name. He had been so careful, so calculated. I couldn't stop scrolling. I couldn't stop looking. I needed to see every piece, every detail. I needed the full picture of the man I thought I married. Around 2 a.m., I finally called my best friend, Olivia. When she answered and heard my voice, she didn't ask questions. She just said, "I'm coming over." By the time she arrived, I was sitting on the kitchen floor with papers spread around me. I remember her kneeling beside me, wrapping her arms around me and whispering, "You didn't deserve this." And for the first time that day, I cried. The next few days passed in a haze. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I walked around my house like a stranger, surrounded by reminders of a man I thought I knew. His shoes by the door, his toothbrush, his half-used shaving cream. Every object screamed a lie. I didn't know what to do with the information I had. Should I confront Renee? Should I talk to his family? Should I scream, break things, disappear? Instead, I sat in silence and read more. There were emails between him and Renee where he talked about our kids, our home, and vacations they took together. On weekends, he claimed to be working in Oregon or Northern California. One photo showed him at Disneyland holding the little girl's hand, grinning like the happiest dad alive. The timestamp? The same weekend he told me he was stuck on a delayed project in Sacramento. What crushed me most wasn't just the cheating. It was the love. It wasn't a fling. He hadn't been using her. He loved her. The same way I thought he loved me. I decided I had to speak to his mother. I needed answers. When I showed up at the hotel where she and his sister were staying, they looked surprised to see me. His mom didn't even invite me in. She just stood in the doorway, arms crossed, like she was bracing for a storm. "I just want the truth," I said quietly. She hesitated, then stepped aside. Inside the hotel room, his sister avoided my eyes. His mom sat stiffly, fingers twisting a tissue in her lap. Finally, she said, "He tried to manage both. He never wanted to hurt either of you." I stared at her. "So you knew?" She nodded. "We met Renee years ago. He introduced her as his fiancée first. We thought it wouldn't last. But then the kids came." Her voice broke slightly. "We didn't know how to stop it. And we didn't know how to tell you." The betrayal from Michael was sharp. But this was worse. They had seen me, sat at my table, smiled in my photos. And the whole time, they knew. I felt my stomach twist. "So which one of us was the real wife?" I asked, my voice low. His mother looked at me, her eyes red. "I don't know." After that conversation with Michael's mother, something in me shut off. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just walked out of that hotel and into the parking lot like I was on autopilot. It was a strange kind of numbness, deeper than grief, heavier than shock. I didn't feel like a widow anymore. I felt like a ghost in my own life. That night, I sent a message to Renee. I didn't know what I wanted from her. Closure? Answers? Maybe just someone who could understand the insanity of it all? We were two women living parallel lives, unknowingly tethered to the same man, the same lies. I asked if she'd be willing to meet. To my surprise, she agreed. We met at a neutral place, a small cafe in Capitol Hill. It was quiet, almost too peaceful for what we were about to talk about. Renee arrived right on time, looking tired but composed. I saw in her face the same confusion I had seen in my mirror for days. "I didn't come here to fight," I said, as she sat down. "Neither did I," she replied. We talked for over 2 hours. She told me they met 10 years ago, before Michael met me. He had broken things off with her at one point, saying it was too complicated. Then, 2 years later, he came back, said he was ready to be a family. By then, I had already married him. I felt sick. He had been splitting his time, carefully managing both lives. She never suspected anything. He told her I was someone from work, someone he cut ties with years ago. "He was always gone a lot," she said, her voice shaking. "But I just thought that was part of his job." She showed me photos, ones I hadn't seen before. Him at birthday parties, at the beach, building a treehouse. I recognized that smile, that laugh. It was his, but in a world I never knew existed. I told her about our IVF plans, how he'd held my hand in the doctor's office, the baby names we picked out, the way he kissed my forehead and said, "Next year, we'll have our own little one running around." Her eyes welled up. He said the same thing to me. In that moment, I didn't hate her. How could I? She was just as betrayed as I was, just as lost. We sat in silence for a while, two women grieving a man who never really belonged to either of us. When we left, she hugged me. It wasn't warm, it wasn't cold. It was the kind of hug only someone who knows your pain can give. And for the first time, I realized Michael hadn't just broken my heart. He had broken hers too. A week after the funeral, I got a call from Michael's attorney. He said there were documents I needed to sign and a reading of the will scheduled for Friday. I didn't even know Michael had written a will. We'd never talked about it. When I showed up at the law office, I saw Renee already seated in the waiting room with her kids. The tension was sharp, like walking into a room filled with broken glass. She gave me a polite nod, but neither of us said a word. The attorney led us into a conference room. I sat on one side of the long table, Renee on the other. The kids played with crayons in the corner, too young to understand how their lives were about to change. Then he opened the folder and began reading. It felt like I was sitting through a slow, deliberate unraveling of everything I thought I knew. Michael had updated his will 2 years ago. In it, he left the bulk of his estate, his savings, his investment accounts, even a life insurance policy, to Renee and the children. To me, he left the house in Seattle, a modest amount in a joint account, and a short note. "For Camila, thank you for everything. I hope this place brings you peace." Peace? I felt like someone had punched the air out of my lungs. 7 years of marriage, and I got a house and a thank you note? I couldn't speak. I just stared at the paper, waiting for someone to say it was a mistake, that there was another version, something, anything. But no one did. After the meeting, the lawyer pulled me aside. "There's something else," he said, lowering his voice. Michael had been working on a new will. It was never signed, but in it the distribution was more balanced. He showed me the draft. It divided everything equally, between Renee, the kids, and me. "He emailed me about it 3 weeks before his death," the lawyer added, said he wanted to make things right. That nearly broke me. He knew. He knew what he was doing wasn't fair, and maybe, just maybe, he was trying to change. But now it was too late. I walked out of that office into the gray Seattle afternoon, feeling more hollow than I had at the funeral. I had lost my husband, my identity, my sense of truth, and now, even in death, he had managed to split me in two. Grief is strange. It doesn't move in a straight line. Some days I woke up and went through the motions like nothing had changed. Other days I couldn't even brush my teeth. What was I mourning, really? The man? Or the illusion of him? I stopped checking my phone for messages that would never come. I stopped expecting to hear his key in the door. But every now and then, I'd catch myself setting out 2 mugs for coffee, or reaching for his side of the bed. Muscle memory is cruel like that. People around me said I should move on, start fresh. But how do you move on from a life that never truly existed? How do you grieve someone who was never fully yours? I started seeing a therapist. At first I barely spoke, but over time the words came. Slow and jagged, like glass being pulled from my chest. She helped me understand that closure wasn't something I'd be handed. I'd have to build it myself. One afternoon, I packed up Michael's things. Not angrily, not tearfully, just fine. I donated most of his clothes, kept only one sweater, the gray one he always wore on rainy Sundays. I didn't know if I kept it out of love or habit. Maybe both. I also started writing again, journaling at first, then short essays. I wrote about betrayal, about grief, about what it feels like to question your entire history with someone. Somehow putting the pain into words gave me a kind of control over it. I never spoke to Michael's family again. They didn't reach out, and I didn't either. I think we all knew there was nothing left to say. Renee and I texted once or twice, just simple updates, how the kids were doing, how we were coping. We weren't friends, but we were something else. A strange kind of sisterhood no one asks for. Eventually I decided to sell the house. I walked through each room one last time. The living room where we danced on New Year's Eve, the kitchen where we argued over nothing and made up over pancakes, the bedroom where I dreamed of a future that would never come. Then I left the keys on the counter and closed the door behind me. That night, I booked a flight to Denver, a city I'd always wanted to visit but never had the time. I didn't know what came next, but I knew staying in that house meant staying stuck. Letting go didn't feel like freedom at first. It felt like loss. But I was beginning to see that maybe they were the same thing. Denver wasn't magical. It didn't heal me overnight, but it gave me space. Space to breathe, space to exist without being Michael's wife or the woman he lied to. I was just Camila, and that was enough. I rented a small studio apartment near a park, nothing fancy, just mine. I spent my mornings walking, listening to podcasts about rebuilding after loss. I got a part-time job at a local art store. Quiet work, healing work. For the first time in years, I felt like I was living in my life, instead of watching it from the outside. Some days were still hard. I'd see a couple holding hands or a dad pushing his daughter on a swing, and grief would hit me all over again. Not because I missed Michael, but because I missed who I thought he was. I missed the future I had planned. But pain, I've learned, is a teacher, and it taught me how to let go of who I was trying to be for someone else and rediscover the woman I was before him. I started painting again. I hadn't touched a canvas in years. My first few attempts were chaotic and angry, just colors smeared across paper. But then one morning, I painted a woman standing on a cliff, hair blowing wildly in the wind. Alone, but strong. That was the first time I saw me again. I also joined a support group. It wasn't just for widows, it was for women who'd survived betrayal, gaslighting, manipulation. And for the first time, I said it out loud. He had another family. And I didn't know. No one flinched, no one judged, they just nodded. They got it. That kind of quiet understanding felt like being seen for the first time in months. It's been over a year now. I still get questions from people who don't know. "Where's your husband?" they'll ask. And I'll smile and say, "That's a long story." But the truth is, I don't owe anyone an explanation. Not anymore. Michael didn't just lie to me, he underestimated me. He thought I'd fall apart and never recover. He thought he could write my story for me. But he was wrong. This story, my story, isn't about a man who broke me. It's about a woman who put herself back together.